just be a fly on the wall to all the sorts of different questions, all the different scenarios that somebody might face it in all the different things that we do. It makes it so much easier for you to then anticipate when you're on your own. Because a lot of times I remember when I first started out, I was like a deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, like, I don't know how to answer this question. Or hello, and welcome to another episode of Level Up. I'm Katie. I'm here, of course, with Daniel. Who
Course.
other than you? And our dog, who isn't going to talk, but you might hear him tapping around as he is in our office today.
Around. You might hear
Tap,
our
tap, tap.
dog tap dancing. That's what he does.
He's just like wandering right now.
Yeah, he's kind of meandering. He doesn't even know why he's here, but it was what would you call it? I guess what's the word I'm looking for? We're just being nice. That's the word I'm looking for.
Well,
One of the contractors is afraid of dogs. And last time he came in when we weren't there and left immediately without doing any work because the dog was there. And so, in order to get some work done today for contractor, we took the dog and he will be a part of the podcast potentially. Although I doubt it. He's pretty quiet,
yeah, but he may bark or
except for that tap dancing.
exactly. Otherwise, today we are talking about what? You want to introduce the topic?
Sure. We're talking about how to get answers to tough questions is the easiest way to put it. In our business, there are a bunch of different questions that we need answers to. And often we get more uncomfortable than we need to, maybe when we're trying to get it out of our clients or get it out of our colleagues or whatever. Like, this is sort of a universal talk about difficult conversations. It dovetails a bit into objections, I guess, which we've talked about in the past. But really, this is just a crash course on moving forward with your work, really. How to
Yeah.
handle those tough questions so you can get your job done and you can service your clients effectively.
Yeah. It's something that a lot of us tend to beat around the bush about when it comes to getting answers to difficult questions. And really, you're much better served, and your clients are much better served if you can just ask those more direct questions, get the answers you're looking for so that you can better provide them with the best possible service. One very basic one I can think of is just even budget when it comes to your clients. And sometimes people aren't as forthright when it comes to how much they can afford when they're looking for a house. And of course, you need to know that in order to better direct their search. But I find one experience I've had in the past is, clients have a certain budget, but then they start asking to see properties that are over their budget. And I've gone down the path of showing them those options. And sometimes their budget is actually higher than what they had originally said. And other times they're really hoping that maybe they can get that property for it within their budget, but we're wasting our time seeing it. So really, this lack of asking the right questions can lead to a big waste of your time and your client's time.
I guess that's a good example of not just the question in the moment, but how you've prepared to that point for the question. So if you've done your work and established a baseline budget wise with somebody, and now it appears that they're going off path that you had laid out there, doesn't mean that they haven't changed their mind, but it does mean it makes it easier, really, because you've prepared with the initial set of questions. You've prepared yourself to now maybe update where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
So rather than saying somebody is deranged, which I don't think anybody would say, but they've given you a budget of 1.1 million and now they want to see a place that's going to go for 1.3, and now you've got a tail behind you. this is this might be another video episode just because you've literally got fur that's walking around behind you. But rather than say, no, you said 1-1, we're staying at this, it just creates the opportunity to have a dialogue and just ask a much easier question that might have been difficult otherwise, in saying, okay, well, has your situation changed? Or after looking at things, do you now realize that your budget actually is able to stretch to this point. Or the question might just be, is there some work you need to do on your end to establish whether this is doable based on what we talked about before, right?
Mm,
None of these are implying negativity or that they can't afford it. I think that might be the worry sometimes people have. It's less about, hey, you're not doing what's right. It's more about, uh-oh, they've told me something and now I'm pushing them to, if I ask the question, it's going to insult them. Like, what do you mean I can't afford it? Well,
mhm.
I'm not saying you can't afford it. That's why it's a question, like, but we want to make sure that this is worth your time. And it only can be if we can establish that, in fact, this is
Yeah.
within your budget.
And it's so important to ask these questions up right away when you start
Mhm.
wondering these things, because you can get to a point where you get so far down a path that you haven't asked somebody the question, and then it just really appears odd, or you look very unprofessional because you haven't verified that information. You've kind of just been going along with whatever they've been doing. So it is very important when you start questioning things with your clients, or just even in a situation when it comes to working with another agent, ask the question right away. Don't feel uncomfortable. It's better to get that clarity ahead of time. And as I said, it just saves everybody so much time.
Now, even though this is an episode about us asking the tough questions, most
Mm,
of this advice and most of this process goes both ways, because conversations are laced with tough questions in both directions, right? Like, we sometimes have to ask some tough questions, and we are asked a lot of tough questions in the role that we've got. And the way that we deal with and prepare for both is generally the same, which is kind of strange. But when you think about it, we're going to go through a few of the different things and steps that you might want to take to prepare yourself. With which preparation is probably the first step in itself, which we can get into. Um, but this ties into, as I grew up, what my dad was a media trainer. He was in the media for years, and then turned that into a career in media training, which was training people to deal with tough questions. And
wow.
often he was the one who would ask tough questions. And a lot of this advice is the stuff that flows the exact same way. Like, real estate is another business, is another place where you're going to be faced with these sorts of relationships. So we can start with, I mentioned preparation. Preparation for me is built on anticipation, on anticipating what's possibly going to come and how you want the direction of something to go. So this, first of all, might tie into just the way that you start those initial conversations, but the questions you're asking, I think you need to be able to anticipate the sorts of answers you're going to get, the sorts of objections you're going to get, and create your questions and maybe subsequent answers around that anticipation, so that things flow in a way that you are able to, at least in some degree, control.
Yeah, exactly. And I like how you said you're asking questions back to them versus statements or assumptions based on what people are saying. So, like in the example of price, if you thought your clients had a certain budget and now they're sending you properties that are 100,000 more than their budget, the question is, has anything changed from your budget perspective? Have you received an updated pre-approval, or is there anything I need to know about your budget that's new that you haven't mentioned? As opposed to saying, oh, I thought you couldn't afford that, or I thought your budget was this.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, but
You
I
don't have that
find,
kind of money.
yeah, it's always good in any situation, especially in negotiations, to turn it around and ask a question of somebody else. And when it comes to negotiations, it's a little bit different because you're wanting to ask a question and try to be as silent as possible. I find that's always helpful. Like when you ask the question and just let them kind of trail off and keep going, like that's when people really start revealing a lot of information. So as many questions you can ask, and I know this is completely different than the budget theme, but yeah, I find that that's really powerful.
Well, and questions that yeah, like we talk about open and closed-ended questions in the past
Mhm.
as well. In virtually every situation, you want to be asking open-ended questions where you can get more information out of somebody than just a yes or a no. Now, there are situations where a yes or a no might be more helpful because all you want is a yes or a no, like just places where you're trying to get agreement. But I'd argue even in those situations, when you just get a yes or a no, at least for me, I question whether the person really understands what they're saying when there's
Yeah.
no further discussion. And
Elaboration. Yeah.
yeah, like unless you ask a question like the way I talk, where it's a 4-hour question and you've basically laid out everything for them and they just need to say yes.
Well, one thing that I find, and I find a lot of people do this as well, in addition to me, is you ask a question and then you answer it for them, which is really weird.
Mm.
And I find that that can really impact the answer you get, or it doesn't allow elaboration on the other side. Like, is your client looking for over ask? As in, are they looking for $300,000, or are they look over ask, or are they looking for closer to where where it's priced? Or, like, you kind of lay out the options, and then it allows somebody just to take the easy route and just pick one of those answers as opposed to elaborating further.
Well,
Yeah.
think of like the surveys you get and the different formats to questions that are deliberately put in front of you. Some of them are multiple choice. Some of them leave a blank where you have to narrate your own answer and come up with details. Some of them are a scale. Some of them are true or false, whatever. The way we ask questions, we should be as thoughtful as those are in determining what format of an answer we want as well. What sort of
Mm.
detail do we require?
Yeah.
And how can we make it most comfortable and lead somebody into that type of an answer? So the way that you
Yeah.
just said that, it's like a multiple choice.
Yeah.
Like, are we this or are we this?
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean the other person can't say, well, it's neither,
Yeah.
but at least, you're pushing people to come to a place where you understand and where it's useful to you as well.
Yeah.
Not just where it's comfortable for them to answer. Like, it's great. We want to make people comfortable to answer, but not if their answer is completely useless or off the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think we get that a lot when it comes to the price discussions with agents.
Mhm.
Because and don't get me wrong, just because you ask a question like that doesn't mean that the answer is always going to be, well, it's market,
Mhm.
or well, do the research, or the other agent, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. You might get that answer, but we want to ask questions to put people in as close a position to giving us what we want as we can,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And, a great example of asking questions and anticipating ahead of time is in your listing presentation. When you ask a client at the beginning of the listing presentation, what's most important to you? You know how to frame the conversation and the presentation moving forward. If getting the best prices is the most important, or commission, you need to frame your presentation around the answers to those questions and justifying commission, if commission is one of the things that's most important to somebody. But it's so much better knowing that ahead of time, even for other agents, when you're in a multiple offer situation. What's most important to your client? I mean, most of the time it's going to be price, but sometimes other things factor in, and you can frame and make your client's offer as competitive as possible.
And that's where being nimble in where questions take you is so important, right?
Mm,
Because
yeah.
some questions have a finite, this is all I need to know. But most of the time in our industry, they're just part of a larger journey or a larger story where you need to be prepared for the forks in the road as you're dealing with your clients or as you're dealing with your colleagues,
Yeah.
because you're asking the question because you don't know the answer, right?
Hmm.
You're not asking the question just to make conversation, usually, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't know the answer, it could go in multiple different directions,
Yeah.
right? So you need to, and that also leads to something else, if I can take us in another direction, speaking of which,
For
is
it.
we're in an industry where there's a lot of uncertainty, like everything, whether it's pricing or what people are expecting or blah blah blah, the economy itself. And the more we're able to acknowledge that uncertainty as we're asking questions and as we're having these conversations, I find that to be a lot easier to soften the blow of questions and answers, right? Like, if I can give an example, I mean, even if we're talking about prices and you want to talk to people about what they're expecting or where they're going to go, when you can get both sides of the table, whether it's your client or your colleagues, to acknowledge the fact that we don't know, It doesn't mean we're going to agree, but it also doesn't, it takes away the factual nature of something that isn't factual. And I've talked before about how I don't like how people talk in absolutes, like there is a right answer to everything. There's not. There's no right answer to any of these questions, commissions, prices, whatever. There might be what you want or what they want, or bottom lines or things like that. But ultimately, when you can acknowledge between the two of you that this market and expectations need to be fluid, it makes things easier in the moment, and it makes things easier as things might change as you go forward as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's all about just, and it's the experience too. And if you're a new agent coming into this, a lot of times you don't know what to expect. So that's why if you can get some mentorship or shadow an agent and just be a fly on the wall to all the sorts of different questions, all the different scenarios that somebody might face it in all the different things that we do, it makes it so much easier for you to then anticipate when you're on your own. Because a lot of times I remember when I first started out, I was like a deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, like, I don't know how to answer this question. Or this listing presentation went so badly because I never even asked them what was most important to them at the beginning. I just went straight into it because I was so nervous. And half the time I was talking about stuff that didn't even matter to them. So it's really, it comes down to a lot of experience and practice too. Don't just go into a buyer presentation or a buyer meeting. Make sure you are practicing that ahead of time, going through the presentation, understanding what are the different important factors that typically, a typical buyer will have, and how can I ask questions to make sure I am delivering on the things that are most important to them. So it's really a lot of preparation ahead of time, and over time you just get more used to it and know what to expect.
When you learn from, like you said, when we know how tough it has been or can be to answer tough questions, the more you're able to put the hat on of being on that side of the fence, it makes it easier for you to structure your own questions to take that uncomfortableness away from the people we're asking as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Right? Like we need to learn from our own struggles answering things. And really, we're probably we must, I hope you're more comfortable talking real estate and asking questions in real estate than our clients are.
Yeah.
So we need to take our own maybe discomfort in certain things, multiply that to whatever level we can to make
Mhm.
it as easy as possible. And tough questions don't need to be framed as tough. I think because of our nerves around a question that's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
whether it's price or commission or whatever, that comes out in the question or in the discussion and creates nerves that might not have been there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need to be comfortable with it before someone we're asking can be comfortable with it, or there's no chance.
100%. Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Especially, I'm thinking of open houses, for example, and you have buyers come in. And a lot of us just beat around the bush in terms of asking them, do they have an agent that they're working with? So you got to find a question that makes you comfortable so that you can just ask it, that it rolls off your tongue. Like, do you have anybody helping with your search right now? Like, I feel like that's a better question than like, are you working with an agent? I don't know. For some reason, that comes across a little bit more relaxed to me. But that might just be me. But it's just a more comfortable way for me of asking that question versus, are you under a contract with a buyer agent right now? Kind of thing. Like,
It sends a much different message, just the two ways of
yeah,
asking that. Like on the spectrum of, will you pay me double commission to buy this with me,
yeah,
to, hey, how's your search going? Like
yeah. Have you
however
just started?
have
Yeah,
you just start, like questions are built around relationship building,
yeah.
regardless of what you're asking and to who and in what situation.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of why it's important we are comfortable asking as many as possible. Like this is how we have our conversations. Tough questions or easy questions, you want to be doing that because the moment you don't ask something, you risk putting a hard stop on the conversation. And if you're building a relationship, you want to be asked questions and you want to ask questions as well, because that incites an answer, which keeps a conversation going.
Yeah.
And not just grows a relationship, but also grows your knowledge about the people you're dealing with. Like that's why you're asking. It's not just to be cute. It's to
Mhm.
actually build your own understanding of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like everybody's different. Like I find sometimes you don't want to ask certain questions up front because you don't want to, like, I'm just thinking of the social media conversation. I had somebody reached out to me about a property I had just put up on my stories and they were interested, and we got into, they're looking for a house. But they're kind of like looking but not really looking. They're not in like a serious phase of a search. They're just kind of seeing if there's anything that comes up in their neighborhood. They'd be interested in potentially looking at it with a few different factors. I didn't get into like their specific requirements. And after the conversation, like my mind speaking with them was I want her to keep talking. Um, I don't want to ask a question that's going to lead to no response, because that's sometimes what happens in text messages or direct messages with people. You kind of end up scaring them off. But at the same time, I wish I could have found out through that conversation if they have somebody right now that's kind of looking out for them for properties. Because I did say I'd keep an eye out, and obviously I will keep an eye out for the type of property they're looking for. But I don't know for sure whether or not they're working with an agent. So it's one of those things, like you want to build some relationship up front with certain types of people before you kind of dive into real business stuff. But at the same time, you kind of have to reveal that information at least early on, earlier as possible, as opposed to like me sending her listings for the next 6 months and then realizing that she found something and has now working with an agent that she's always intended to work with.
Context matters. I mean, how did these people come to you? What point in the relationship are you at?
Mhm.
But with everything, again, questions whether you're asking or answering, that ties into how important it is to be honest and trustworthy in what
Mm.
you're asking and what you're answering. Like, if you're just talking with someone, avoiding the tough question because you know you're going to pop it in 3 weeks, and you're really just, it's not that you're being dishonest, but you're clinging to something you should be asking now, but not.
Mm.
You're wasting everybody's time. And it shows when you do ask the question, especially if it's apparent it's a question you could have asked 3 weeks ago, that how disingenuous have you been to this point because you've just been working someone to get to that point, right? It doesn't mean ask that question on day one. I agree with you. But at the same time, like you said, if you wait, you might have wasted your own time.
Yeah.
And, you've put on this front of someone who's dealing with someone in a different way versus where you are actually trying to get to. Doesn't mean you don't want to have a good relationship with someone, but you do want to have a relationship with them as a client rather than as a best friend who you're giving advice to while they work with another agent.
Right. Because if you flip the positions, and if you are a buyer, like somebody like you might just think this person's trying to be nice. They have access to all the listings, are continually like looking at all the options. Like, sure, if they find something, feel free to send it over. Like sometimes people don't even know what the rules and regulations are. Maybe an agent hasn't fully explained like what you should be doing if another agent approaches you, you know what I mean? So you gotta be careful there, and you gotta understand that the onus is on you as the agent to ask these questions, to identify whether this person is worth further conversation, is worth potentially trying to get to be a client. So it's really important that you put the responsibility on yourself.
Well, I think it's, yeah, I was going to go in a different direction, but I'm just going to agree with you on that one rather than adding more words to it.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So what other types of, we were talking about tougher questions before we went on here. Um, I feel like there was a major one that escapes me right now. That was the first one we were actually talking about. I think it was just about, was it about signing the contract? I think
Um,
like
I
asking the
mean,
question of somebody like, so are you ready to go? Like, are we ready to do
mhm,
this?
mhm,
Like that, I think is a different type of question where it's not about questioning people's intent from or questioning people from a affordability or how high they're willing to go when you're already working with them. But when you're trying to establish that you're moving forward with a relationship, I think that is one of the more uncomfortable things, similar to the commission one, where people are nervous about what the answer might be. I
Mm.
think that's different from a tough question where
Yeah.
you just don't want to address something that might be
Yeah.
a bad elephant in the room where everybody knows it, but nobody wants to talk about it. This, to your point of people don't really understand how things work. That's where I was going to go with it before, but I didn't want to just rant. People don't know the rules the way that we think they know the rules, or people don't understand, I guess, client or colleague etiquette all the time, maybe in the way that we operate. And
Yeah.
so asking a question where for us it might seem uncomfortable because, hey, this is something that's going to make everything weird now. In a lot of cases is just something where if it's approached the right way, this is actually educating people on something it's not that they weren't wanting to hear it, it's they didn't even know it was something that was part of the process at all,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So from a preparation side, again, the more you're able to address these things from moment one rather than putting them off and saying, here's like, if for, like you said, in our listing presentations, or even in a buyer presentation, here are the steps of the process. Day one, you haven't assumed anything, but it's like, this is how things work. And
Yeah.
here's the service I offer and the steps we go through in order to get your job done for you as if well as legally but as efficiently and beneficially as possible to you. And then when it comes time to say, hey, are we ready to go, it's not like how do I ask if they actually want to do a listing agreement with me? It's like, no, that's part of the process. So now it's
Yeah.
time to say, you know not not so much like, are you sure you want to work with me? It's more of a like, hey, when can I come over and get this paperwork done so that we can get moving on everything? Like, I've given you the
Yeah.
timeline. Here's the step we're at.
Mhm.
Should the question might just be, would you rather e-sign it or do it in person? That might be the question. Not
Yes.
not do you want to or
Are you
not?
ready? Yeah. Are you
Yeah.
are you sure? Yeah. No, and buyer rep agreements is one of the big ones because I fell victim to this even to this day where, luckily a lot of my clients are repeat or referrals, so the trust is there, but still I should be getting that agreement signed up front. Whereas if I wait too long and I've gone out with them 10 times to see places, it's kind of like, ooh, this is weird now that I'm asking for this. So the sooner you can get that done, and as you said, presented in a way in a presentation that tells them that is the step you're on, it just makes it so much easier. And you're a
Well, and
professional. You should be doing this. Like,
you just took the words out of my
yeah,
mouth. Like, as a
come on.
professional,
Yeah.
as a professional, we're not just there to ask questions. Like, we're not there to say, what do you think? I mean, we
Yeah.
are, but not really, right? Like, we need to have process, systems, the things that are instilling confidence in other people that make these tough questions less tough. It's the same reason when we talk about valuations or expectation management, you need to be able to back things up with evidence and facts and data and experience. Because when you do that, it gives people confidence in the recommendations you make. It, in a lot of ways, tempers the answers they might have given,
Mm.
right? Like when we send people value or comps before we do a listing presentation,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have statistics on this, but I'm going to say, statistically speaking, without any facts to back me up, ironically, when you go into a listing presentation having provided comps versus not, when it comes time to ask the potential client what their expectations would be for a property, they are way more in line
Mm.
with where it should be, quote unquote, than where they might have wanted it to be prior if they've been given some data,
Yeah.
right? It just brings them to a place that helps, I guess, bring their answer to where we'd expect it to be or where it should be
Hmm. Yeah.
because of the data. Where if you just go because someone called and said, "Hey, I want to list my house. Can you come over?" And then you find out it's because their neighbor told them their place is worth $8 billion and you've told them nothing otherwise. Now you're working from a place from behind, from trying to convince them they're wrong versus not doing anything other than saying, "Hey, I brought this data or I'm giving you this stuff ahead of time. This will help, I guess, push our conversation in a more clear way so that you understand what's going on. I'm sure you know all this already, right? Like it's one of those, depending on the personality of the people you're dealing with, if they're know-it-alls, that's fine. Then they must know it all, but you're just doing it to be thorough.
Exactly. Cover your bases.
Yeah. Cover your bases.
Finley.
Well, I mean, our job is built on questions that are tough, but I think we've covered the overall.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Finley
anybody
just
has tough
almost
questions they're
scared.
struggling with, for those of you who are out there sitting on someone you just haven't been able to have the tough conversation with, reach out.
Yeah.
Maybe just go to Tehil again.
He was poking his face out of the bottom of one of my blinds that isn't fully down, and there was somebody walking by, and they like, oh my god, there's this like
Please.
dog's nose like on the window.
Wondering
That's
what's
funny.
happening in here. That's okay.
Okay, it's our
Right, we're a
office now.
dog-friendly office. Come visit everybody and actually, no, don't come and bring your dogs. I don't even know why I'm encouraging that. You can come
I
visit
wouldn't mind.
anytime.
I wouldn't mind to see people's dogs.
Don't mind, but that's kind of a weird blanket invite. Like,
Like a dog, yeah, a dog party. But
yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, it's better to come to our office and bring your dog versus going to a showing and bringing your dog, which happened to me this weekend with the buyer's visit. The buyers of my listing decided to, although it was like a little dog that they carried around the whole time,
Still
but
though.
yeah, my clients are allergic to dogs and cats, and you bring your dog through without even asking if you can do that. Like, who does that? I don't
I think
know.
that's the tougher part of it is that it wasn't asked. Although to me, I don't know if we're crazy because people we've brought it up to don't seem to be as bothered by it. It's not that I'm bothered. We're dog people, but like it's
Yeah,
just
no, it's just,
not how it's
yeah.
done.
It's just weird to me that you would even think that would be okay. I mean, actually, you know what? I remember one of my clients did the same thing. They showed up with it. They didn't even, but like this was like a family. They knew each other. They knew that, you know what I mean? But
Well,
like, yeah,
the agent was like a related party, right?
related party. Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so they
So
knew.
that's the
And
thing.
yeah,
You could get blindsided by somebody bringing someone, and that's different. And then that
yeah,
maybe creates a new difficult conversation.
yeah.
If
Yeah.
you know it's happening, at a minimum, just ask the question.
Yeah. I mean, it's making me wonder if we should put in our listing instructions from now on, like no dogs. Like, I can't believe I have to say this, but no dogs.
I don't know. I don't know. I think in this industry, expect the unexpected. We talked about uncertainty. I don't
It's
think
true.
you need to preempt everything with every permutation possible, but
I
when you
know.
have an experience, it
Well,
does.
that's
It's like,
it. Then it makes you wonder from now on, is everybody going to bring their dogs to showings from now on? Is
maybe.
that what we're doing now?
I mean, it was a small dog. You said, were they carrying it the whole time?
Yeah, they were carrying it. It was like I
Okay,
think it was like
that's
a
not
little lap dog. It's not like horrible, but like if your clients are allergic to pets, like you should not be bringing a pet into somebody's house. You know what I mean? Like if
you.
I don't know. Anyway, I'll move on from that. We've
When
dealt with it.
allergies are going to start being listed as a listing feature, as
Yeah.
a field on a listing.
Yeah.
Well, it is what it
Anyway,
is. They made it through. Nothing was damaged.
yeah.
Nothing
Dog didn't
smells
pee on
weird,
the carpet
hopefully.
or anything. Yeah. Hopefully
That
not.
would suck. But they've already bought the house, so
Yeah.
they'll deal with the pee.
It's on them now.
It's on them. It's on their
Yeah.
carpet. All right. Well, everybody, now that we've tailed off, see what I did there? Tailed off.
Uh,
Wow. That was
okay.
as weak as it's ever been.
I would concur.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And feel free to reach out at Level Up for Realtors on Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know if you have any questions, topic ideas, or anything else that you would like.
Would
Except
you
for my
send them to
firstborn.
us? When can we expect those from you? See what I did? Some questions there.
Mm.
When can we expect those reviews from you? No, it's not going to happen. Come on, guys.
Look us up.
You say
All
hook
right.
us up or look us up?
Hook us up. Look us up.
Okay, yeah. Do both. All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Level up, level up, level up, level up.